At 03:45 on a cool March morning in 1925, tunnel surveyor Emil Barais lowered a brass plumb line beside the Sphinx's left paw and noted the cavity beneath, 8.7 meters long, lined with limestone so fine it refused the clatter of his calipers. The ledger ink caught the first hint of a hollow chamber, precisely where priests of the New Kingdom had whispered that Thoth hid the daylight of ages. Lantern soot smudged the page as the measurement pressed against myth, challenging the smooth narrative that no secret slept under the stone guardian. A gust pushed chalky air into his lungs, carrying the mineral tang of recently disturbed fill, and meanwhile the desert around Giza, dampened by night dew, held its breath as the tape measure trembled. Silence held across the dunes. Sand stuck to perspiring fingers, and for a fragile instant the engineer felt the same shiver. The dream, scribing scribes described, revealing how legend and calculation brushed shoulders. This collision of decimal certainty and legend coaxed the ancient hush to flutter, promising revelations that could bruise history's tidy timeline, though dawn still waited beyond the ridge instead of breaking through. If these midnight murmurings ease you, subscribe for more whispered histories. A single lamp glowed inside the narrow shaft as stoic assistant Huda Amin braced her shoulder against a timber brace, listening for the creak that might betray collapse. The oil smelled faintly of cumin and wool, mingling with the salt on her palms from hours of hauling gravel buckets. Beside her, the metal teeth of a hand auger continued its lazy grind down the newly exposed seam, each turn releasing a warm gust of earth that had not tasted night air for millennia. Huda's breath matched the rhythm, steady and careful, as she hummed a lullaby her grandmother claimed was sung to protect tomb guardians. She thought of the Sphinx's worn face above them, catching dawn light, watching every careful motion. Outside, a camel bell chimed, soft as porcelain. Within, the dust motes drifted like slow snow, and the lamplight gilded their edges, teasing the possibility that somewhere ahead, a polished wall waited to mirror their awe. By dawn, the excavation log recorded a shift in texture. The fill beneath the Sphinx's paw moved from wind-blown sand to purpose. Packed rubble, a clear mark of human intention dating to the WWII restoration around 650 BCE. The notes described crushed pottery flakes embedded like shells in mortar, while the smell of damp clay rose distinct from the dry desert crust. Barais ordered the sieve crew to work by hand, swabbing each fragment with camel hair brushes, their fingertips burning from the grit. As they found a chipped amulet bearing the crossed sandals of a high priest, the crisp lines suggested late dynastic craftsmanship, hinting at ritual renewal performed under starlight to re-sanctify the Sphinx's gateway. What power did they believe slumbered beneath that paw, and why seal it again after their ceremonies affirmed it still breathed? The tools clicked, the morning breeze cooled their sweat, and the tape measure lay coiled like a waiting serpent. While the first light stretched across the plateau, a reflection flickered on polished copper. Inspector Selim Naguib reread Herodotus's claim that the Sphinx held subterranean passages linking to once lost shrines. The parchment smelled of almond oil and old glue, transporting him to Alexandria's shadowed archives where scholars debated late into balmy nights. He compared the ancient note to modern theodolite readings, his eyes adjusting to the alternating glare of sunlight and lamp. Sand hissed underfoot as a gust slid along the tent canvas, reminding him that each grain carried centuries of footsteps, soldiers, pilgrims, engineers. Could textual echoes from Greek chroniclers align with the quiet cavity in the limestone foundation? On the table, a bowl of dates shimmered with syrup, grounding him in simple sustenance amid swirling possibilities. He traced the Sphinx's outlines on vellum, the ink glistening, and decided to test for hidden passages with ground soundings before rumor overtook evidence. The midday heat drew sweat along every wrist as the 1926 team lowered bell-shaped seismographs onto the flagstones between the Sphinx's paws, capturing the tiniest tremors. Leather straps squeaked, and the instrument's springs hummed like distant bees while the plateau's occasional breezes slipped through. Acoustic pulses suggested an oblong void, 12 meters by 4, sloping toward the monument's heart. The readings charmed the archaeologists. They also unsettled the surrounding villagers who recalled Mamluk tales that, whenever people pried too far, a desert storm punished them. The sand remembers. Instruments hum. The hollow waits. To counter fear, the engineers brewed sweet mint tea, the steam perfuming their canvas shelter, and they assured everyone that the guardians of the plateau could share their stories. As the team mapped the cavity, memory leapt backwards to 1400 BCE, when scribes of Amenhotep II carved reliefs showing ritual cleansings beneath celestial skies. Limestone bas-reliefs, discovered near the Sphinx Temple in 1818, yet often overlooked, depicted priests pouring natron-scented water over a hidden dais. The carvings glowed with faint ochre traces in torchlight, and the stone's cool surface clung to the fingers of scholars tracing the scene. The iconography implied a subterranean chamber where star charts were refreshed, aligning the Sphinx with Sirius and Orion to renew royal legitimacy. Instead of conquest, the power here was calendrical, a ritual to reset cosmic clocks. Could the 1925 cavity be the stage where those nocturnal rites unfolded, the natron residue still damp to an ancient sense? The torch hissed, and a fragment of incense hardened like caramel on the altar ledge, reminding everyone that ceremony's value endured in scent and shadow. Yet, in 1375 CE, Sufi chronicler Ibn al-Muqaffa wrote of soldiers smashing a sealed doorway near the Sphinx during a stormy patrol, believing it concealed talismans against plague. His account survived in curled parchment gone brittle like dried lavender, stored today in the Dar al-Kutub library, where the air tastes faintly of paper dust. The soldiers, slogging through muddy winds, heard the desert cry like a kettle drum as rain pelted their helmets. They withdrew when a lightning flash shattered a scaffold, killing a mule. Accident, not conspiracy, halted the intrusion. The chronicler noted how the Sphinx's paws were recovered with mud bricks afterward, both to heal the damage and to placate anxious villagers. The story's cadence carried the shiver of reverence and dread intertwined. Respect for protective mysteries, fear of divine reprisal. And the smell of petrichor still clings to the narrative. As twilight draped the plateau, archivist Madeleine Courteau in 1896 rubbed her fingers over a granite stela retrieved near the Sphinx, its hieroglyphs faint under layers of calcite. She dabbed lemon-scented water to soften the crust, the liquid running cool between her knuckles. The inscription praised a hall of records beneath Ra-Horakhti, describing cedar chests lined with lapis and filled with scrolls that sang when unrolled. While the phrase might be poetic, the stela's edges showed deliberate recarving. Ptolemaic masons tampered with earlier lines, perhaps to insinuate their own divine lineage. Madeleine, seated by a flickering coal lamp, felt the granite's chill through her velvet gloves and pondered why the Ptolemies interfered. In their era of cultural fusion, controlling the Sphinx's mystery meant anchoring Greek-led rule in Egyptian sacred lore. She noted this, the scent of lamp smoke lingering, as yet another example of political hands shaping myth. Still, the Napoleonic savants of 1798 recorded a different mood when cannon fire echoed near the Sphinx during French campaigns. Engineer Edouard Deschamps sketched the monument as smoke and grit filled the air, the sandstone tasting metallic where shrapnel nicked its surface. In his journal, he lamented that hurried fortification needs forced soldiers to hew trenches, exposing ancient masonry that they lacked time to document. Respect wasn't absent, urgency replaced it. The Sphinx's forepaws served briefly as battery supports, mingling war with ancient silence. After the campaign, local workers reburied the scars out of pragmatic care to shield the idle guardian from scavengers. The hush that followed was motivated by exhaustion. Secrets postponed because survival demanded it. The cannon's echo faded, replaced by the soft shuffle of workers pushing sand back into place under a sky streaked with powder smoke. As decades turned, the 1913 British Inspectorate authorised a discreet magnetometer survey at Giza. The device, housed in a mahogany case that smelled of beeswax, ticked like a pocket watch when iron anomalies lurked below. The readings near the Sphinx's forecourt spiked, suggesting a lattice of unknown metal rods or bolts, perhaps remnants of late ancient reinforcement. Colonel Peter Brown, the survey leader, sipped tepid lime water as the instrument's needle twitched, and he recorded the anomaly in his notebook with a fountain pen that left a watery sheen. Yet the imperial administration chose quiet. Geological exploration threatened to inflame debates about cultural ownership, so the data were filed under deferred. Silence here stemmed from diplomatic caution. Keep the peace, avoid fueling nationalist sparks. The desert night settled, warm and velvet soft, as the magnetometer case clicked shut, its secrets breathing only on paper. Instead, shift the gaze to 1705 BCE, when the Hyksos occupation reconfigured Lower Egypt's spiritual order. Clay tablets from Avaris mention emissaries journeying to the lion that faces the dawn to negotiate astral rights, their reed styluses etching damp clay that still smells of river mud today. They offered bronze mirrors polished until they flashed torchlight onto the Sphinx's chest, believing reflected radiance could bind celestial favor. The ritual value lay in diplomacy: control the sky, control trade timings. A papyrus fragment hints that native priests redirected them to a lesser shrine, guiding foreign hands away from the true reservoir of knowledge under the pores. Reverence for ancestral guidance, mixed with strategic misdirection, safeguarded the chamber's role. The tablet's baked surfaces feel warm like sunlit brick, reminding us that tactile records preserve the cadence of negotiations held under flickering lamps. As dawn breezes cooled 1937 Cairo, radio engineer Fatima al-Said tested experimental ground-penetrating radar near the Sphinx's flank. The equipment emitted low thrums, hummingbird fast, and the coil smelled faintly of ozone as it skimmed the stone. The radar profile traced a tilted cavity, showing horizontal lines resembling steps or ribs. Fatima, wiping sweat with a linen sleeve, imagined a cavern with ledges for scroll tubes or star tablets. Yet funding evaporated when political unrest redirected resources. The apparatus was mothballed in a dusty closet where copper dust tinged the air. Silence this time grew from bureaucratic upheaval, not malice. Fatima sketched the cavity in pencil, shading the void with soft strokes, and tucked the drawing into a leather portfolio. The pages rustled like distant palm leaves, preserving echoes that would reappear decades later when new technicians reopened the question. Revealing the Sphinx's layered guardianship requires returning to the 4th Dynasty workshops around 2520 BCE, when artisans shaped the limestone colossus. Quarry scars near the monument still hold tool marks that, when traced with fingertips, feel like ridges of aged parchment. Workers lubricated sledges with natron brine, the scent salty and sharp, and chanted to keep rhythm as copper chisels sparked the air. A newly translated ostracon found in 2004 mentions a horizon chamber, carved first, meant to house star tables for Khafre's astronomer priests. The job mattered because accurate celestial mapping determined the Nile's flood expectations, anchoring taxation and ritual. Within that chamber, scribes inked star names while oil lamps perfumed the enclosed space with sesame smoke. Their craft wove cosmic order into daily survival, granting them both prestige and the hush of secrecy, for only stable calendars could validate royal divinity. As French sands piled high in 1753, traveller Richard Peacock noted Bedouin stories of an underground cistern beneath the Sphinx that sang during certain moons. His diary, now butter-soft with age, smells faintly of saffron from his stored spice samples. He described pressing his ear to the worn paw as night winds whooshed through fissures, creating a low whine. Locals said the sound meant ancestral librarians still tuned the stars. Peacock's quill scratched excitedly at this mix of folklore and echo, wondering whether the noise signaled water, air, or incantation. He lacked the tools to probe further, yet his curiosity underlined the Sphinx's role as a convergence of nature, engineering, and myth. The sound's mystery lay not just in explanation, but in its ability to bind listeners together under starlit silence, a communal vigil that gave the Guardian contemporary relevance. Silence held as 1951 archaeologist Zakaria Gonim proposed drilling core samples near the left paw. His blueprint, smudged with chalk, mapped a cross-shaped pattern to avoid damaging potential chambers. The desert sun-baked limestone until it smelled faintly like sun-warmed bread, while pneumatic drills waited, their metal cold against the hands of workers sipping hibiscus tea. Yet after a scaffold collapse elsewhere on the plateau injured 2 labourers, safety inspectors halted all intrusive operations. Accidental tragedy, not conspiracy, delayed the quest. Gonim spent the evening under a buzzing kerosene lamp, recalculating stress loads. He exhaled slowly, appreciating that the Sphinx's secrets could remain encased until methods proved safer. The lamp's glow painted gold halos on the blueprints, and cicadas vibrated beyond the tent, reminding him that patience might be the most respectful form of inquiry. As we alternate evidence and reflection, the humid archives of 1886 Vienna rustled when papyrologist Elise Grunwald deciphered a demotic script from the Roman era. The papyrus, tasting faintly of bitter resin when moist fingers separated its layers, referenced Emperor Hadrian's visit to Memphis. It mentioned philosophers barred from descending a specific stair at Giza because the Guardian rests. Elise highlighted the phrase, as the glancing light made the ink gleam dark crimson. Roman suppression here served dual purpose. The empire controlled narratives to align Egyptian mystique with imperial theology, while also preventing Greek rival schools from accessing wisdom that could challenge official cosmology. Elise, adjusting her pince-nez, felt a chill despite the stuffy room, recognizing that intellectual power lay in managing who experienced the Sphinx's underbelly. Reflection whispered, knowledge, kept like perfume sealed in alabaster, can both preserve and stifle. The desert's breath paused again. Moonlight glazed limestone. Murmurs softened. Cool evening in 1967 found geophysicist Hiroshi Takata rolling a resistivity meter across the Sphinx enclosure after sandstorms scoured its base. The machine's cables dragged, leaving dark lines on the gravel, and the socketed electrodes sank into damp patches smelling of petrichor. The data revealed a high resistivity core under the left paw, consistent with air-filled space rather than solid rock. Hiroshi, savouring the mineral tang on the breeze, plotted the profile in blue ink, the graph paper rustling like silk. Yet the 6-day war erupted weeks later, diverting attention and sealing research chests behind museum shutters. Reverence for national stability took precedence. Scholarship retreated, stored in padded crates lined with cedar shavings. Hiroshi left Egypt reluctant, palms still gritty, vowing to return when calm allowed science to resume its respectful probing. Still tracing older echoes, we glanced to 525 BCE, when Persian king Cambyses II reportedly desecrated Egyptian temples. A fragmentary alabaster relief from Sais, unearthed in 1999, shows priests carrying sealed boxes toward the west, their bare feet dusty, Toro candles flickering. The relief's surface feels cool and slick, and faint multi-point stars etched above hint that the boxes contained astronomical diagrams. Scholars propose that as foreign armies loomed, priests hid key cosmological records beneath the Sphinx, trusting the Leonine Guardian more than vulnerable libraries. The value of those records lay in charting ritual calendars and legitimizing pharaonic authority. They might even encode instructions for rebuilding cosmic order after upheaval. The relief's edges, chipped and smelling faintly of aged tallow from conservation wax, remind us that when empire threatens, sacred knowledge seeks the deepest dens. As dusk settled in 1905, American photographer Harriet Boyd Hawes captured glass plate negatives of the Sphinx, focusing on hairline cracks along the pores. She rinsed the plates in chemical baths that smelled acrid, each swirl catching the fading sun's amber. Beneath magnification, she noticed mortar seams inconsistent with Khafre's era, perhaps late-period repairs sealing an entrance. Her report, typed with carbon ribbon smudges, argued for a hidden restoration chamber. Yet trustees feared sensational claims might invite treasure hunters, so her findings were quietly shelved. Institutional caution muffled them. Harriet folded the letter, its paper crisp, and tucked it beside a lavender sachet, consoling herself with the tactile proof that images can outweigh doubt. The Sphinx's pores, in her photos, gleam softly, the wind-smoothed textures hinting at the careful hands that once tended their secret joints. In winter 1936, Egyptian archaeologist Selim Hassan convened a lamplit survey along the plateau's northern ledge, tracing Harriet's rumoured void with calipers and brass pendulums. His assistants, fingers dusted in chalk, pressed listening rods into limestone that exhaled mineral coolness after dusk. In notebooks smelling of clove liniment, he sketched layered cross-sections and annotated faint vibrations that seemed to hum with prayers to Ma'at rather than coins. A solitary turquoise bead, caught in dune sweepings, glimmered beneath his loupe like a stored promise of equilibrium. Hassan sealed the find in a velvet pouch, noting that resonance, not bullion, might be the guardian's lasting gift. By dawn he ordered the shaft bricked discreetly, letting the sentinel dream on while he dispatched a politely phrased memorandum urging a patient acoustical study before any spades returned. As December 1978 winds chilled the plateau, UNESCO conservators set up sonic tomography gear, releasing pulses that chirped like distant crickets. The screens in their trailer glowed aquamarine, illuminating faces lined with fatigue and hope. Readings again hinted at voids under the pores, particularly on the eastern flank where echo patterns dulled abruptly. Team leader Dr. Coppens dulled abruptly. Leila Habachi, wrapped in a wool shawl that smelled of cedar, insisted on public transparency, yet government liaisons urged discretion pending comprehensive cultural framing. Diplomatically, she agreed, understanding that premature announcements could fracture alliances. Silence now was strategic. Gather proof, build consensus, then whisper the findings with reverent care. Outside, the Sphinx's shadow lengthened, covering the equipment like a protective wing under the moon's pearly gaze. Breath returns in fragments, torches sway. The ground listens patiently. Flashback to 2558 BCE, when Khafre's chief astronomer, the Master of Hours, recorded star risings on diorite slabs. One slab, excavated in 2010 and polished so smooth it mirrors torchlight, bears grooves corresponding to solstice alignments. Residue analysis detected traces of acacia gum and malachite dust, ingredients for ritual inks that smelled sweet and mineral-rich. The astronomer's role was more than observational. He orchestrated temple rituals to synchronize the state with celestial cycles, ensuring the Nile's inundation festivals matched the heavens. The Sphinx's subterranean chamber, likely his workspace, amplified ceremonial power within its cool limestone belly. The air tasted of chalk and incense, and the silence allowed the scratch of reed pens to echo. Authority radiated outward from this hidden classroom, proving that knowledge, curated carefully, sustained the realm. As centuries later, the Ptolemaic engineer Crates of Olinthos visited around 260 BCE, he documented a hydraulic gauge near the Sphinx, noting watermarks on stone slabs. The gauge's carved grooves still retain a faint dampness in humid nights, releasing an earthy smell. Crates described copper floats that clinked softly, measuring the water table vital for subterranean chambers. He believed the cavity stored ritual water, chilled by night air, used to bathe royal statues before dawn. Reflecting, we see how Greek administrators sought to merge Egyptian hydrology with Hellenistic science, harnessing the Sphinx's infrastructure for pragmatic governance. Their diaries mention torchlit inspections where oil flames fluttered, and sandals crushed lotus petals laid by local priests. The interplay of utilitarian curiosity and inherited devotion shaped the chamber's evolving significance. Evening 1842 found Prussian scholar Carl Richard Lepsius examining nearby mastaba blocks by lamplight. The wick hissed, perfuming the tent with tallow. On one block he noticed graffiti from the Coptic era, scratched by fingertips, urging future seekers to respect the gate of remembrance beneath the lion. The letters felt rough against his knuckles, as though the stone retained their plea. Early Christian monks seeking solitude had apparently sealed the entrance to preserve their refuge's sanctity. The value here was contemplative. The secret served as a sanctuary for meditative rites, beyond politics. Lepsius jotted the note, his pen nib squeaking, acknowledging that spiritual quietude can be as compelling as empirical discovery in deciding which doors stay closed. Reaching again for reflective rhythm, the sand sighed. Incense thinned. Breath aligned with starlight. Wind-blown grit reddened cheeks in 1987 when geochemist Soraya Mahmood sampled microfractures on the Sphinx paw. The portable drill whirred softly, releasing powdered limestone that smelled like crushed shells. Her analysis revealed anomalous salts consistent with evaporation inside ventilated spaces, reinforcing the idea of hollow corridors. Soraya's lab notebook, edges frayed, notes, air exchange, patterns, suggesting ancient shafts intentionally breathed. Yet an abrupt funding cut, triggered by economic downturn, shuttered her project. Suppression took the form of austerity. Soraya, under fluorescent lab lights, boxed her samples, the cardboard tasting dry against her tongue as she sealed it. She whispered a promise to return, knowing scientific patience might one day dissolve fiscal barriers. As we loop through time, consider 30 CE, when early Roman administrators instituted censuses requiring precise land measurements. Papyrus tax rolls from this period, still smelling faintly of damp linen. Reference surveyors recalibrating Giza's sacred precinct boundaries. One roll mentions descending the lion's stair to confirm the boundary star, implying the chamber housed instruments. The surveyor's tools. Plumb bobs, knotted cords clicked gently against stone as torches reddened the air. Their task mattered because land rights and tribute calculations hinged on astronomical validation. Reflection arises. By embedding imperial bureaucracy within an Egyptian sacred cavern, Rome co-opted local magic to legitimize rule. The trade-off was a silent bargain. The chamber's mystery endured, yet its function bent toward administrative power. Silence settled anew. Dew beaded on limestone. Dreamers leaned closer. Spring 2009 introduced microgravity measurements by astrophysicist Luis Andrade, whose sensors detected subtle density variations under the Sphinx. The instruments, encased in carbon fiber that smelled faintly of resin, whispered data through fiber optic lines. A significant void appeared at 14 meters depth, aligning with earlier radar hints. Luis imagined a stepped hall, the air within dusty yet cool, perhaps lined with niches. But before results were published, a cyber attack scrambled servers at the Antiquities Council, corrupting files. Technological accident froze the revelation, demonstrating that modern threats can mirror ancient storms in silencing knowledge. Luis spent nights reconstructing data from paper printouts, the toner smudging his fingertips grey while the computer fans hummed like distant cicadas. Looking back to 332 BCE, the arrival of Alexander the Great transformed the Sphinx's aura. Orion's accounts, preserved in manuscripts that smell of goat parchment, recount Alexander laying wreaths at Giza, guided by priests holding lamps fragrant with myrrh. They led him toward a sealed stair, yet stopped, insisting only a rightful pharaoh could enter. Alexander respected the ban, recognizing that the chamber symbolized cosmic legitimacy he sought through other rites. The refusal taught him restraint. In reflection, even conquerors bow to mysteries that anchor local identity. The lamplight etched his profile onto stone, and the warm wax dripped onto the floor, hardening into amber beads that may still cling to hidden tiles. Time weaves forward. Night birds wheel. Soft echoes cradle the plateau. Surveying 1610 travelogues, we find Venetian merchant Pietro dell'Acqua describing a caravan pause near the Sphinx during a sandstorm. He wrote on parchment that smelled faintly of sea salt carried from Mediterranean goods. As wind howled, traders huddled under the guardian's chest, hearing the gusts moan through fissures like flutes. A Coptic guide claimed the sound warned against greed. Nearby, traders poured thick honey into cracks as an offering, the sweetness sticky against their chilled fingers. The storm scoured away a slab, revealing polished stone that Pietro said gleamed like moonlit marble. They covered it again out of gratitude, believing the Sphinx had shielded them. Or, more than secrecy, motivated their careful concealment. Later, in Venice, Pietro displayed a handful of sand, the grains glistening on candlelit tables, telling the sensory-laden story of the desert's protective embrace. Moving into reflective cadence, we note the pause. The sand hushes. Lanterns breathe. In 1996, acoustical engineer Nadia Qureshi conducted resonance tests inside the Sphinx's small-known cavities, clapping softly to measure echoes. The limestone responded with warm, rounded reverberations, suggesting adjacent hollow spaces shaped for sound amplification. The air tasted chalky, and her flashlight beam spread like a silver fan across rough walls. She hypothesized that priests used chants within a subterranean hall to create vibrations aligning with stellar observations, the sonic waves helping them detect subtle shifts. Her published abstract mentioned harmonic corridors, yet critics dismissed it as speculative, and funding bodies recoiled, wary that mystical interpretations might overshadow empirical precision. Suppression here was reputational caution. Nadia continued humming scales in the darkened chamber, the notes curling like smoke, determined that acoustics deserved a place in the Guardian's story. Shift centuries to 640 CE, when Arab general Amr ibn al-Az surveyed Giza's monuments amid the scent of leather armor and horse sweat. Chronicles mention his admiration for the Sphinx's stillness under the noon blaze, and a decision to leave it untouched, fearing that tampering would anger local communities whose cooperation he needed. Instead, he appointed caretakers to watch the pause, ensuring no one looted the sealed entrance rumored to reside there. This reverent governance recognized the Sphinx as a bridge between populations. The caretaker role, described in scrolls with ink smelling of soot, carried authority. They tended fires at twilight, their sandals whispering over stone, keeping the chamber's silence intact as a pledge of mutual respect. The rhythm softens again. Stars glitter. The void inhales gently. In 2006, thermal imaging cameras deployed by the Egyptian Supreme Council of Antiquities captured nocturnal heat anomalies along the Sphinx's forelegs. The infrared display glowed molten orange where warm air seeped from unseen cracks, implying underground spaces ventilated differently from solid rock. The equipment emitted a faint electronic whir, and the team warmed their hands over cups of cinnamon tea as cool desert air bit their cheeks. The anomaly report circulated quietly. Officials planned a measured announcement but faced internal debates about safeguarding the site from sensationalism. Accordingly, they staged a slow drip of data, hoping to frame the discovery as part of ongoing conservation. Secrecy masqueraded as stewardship, navigating between curiosity and preservation. The Sphinx, bathed in soft moonlight, seemed to cradle the warmth within, as though guarding a sleeping archive. We drift backward to 1470 BCE, when Queen Hatshepsut restored temples across Egypt. Reliefs at Deir el-Bahri, their paint still smelling faintly of wizened pigment binders, depict her envoy presenting gold leaf constellations to the Sphinx priests. The priests stand barefoot on smooth limestone, torches casting halos, as they accept the offerings to refurbish star charts stored beneath the lion. This passage emphasizes the ritual's role in legitimizing her reign. A woman claiming pharaonic power needed celestial endorsement. Within the hidden chamber, scribes likely recalibrated calendars under her directives, their reed pens squeaking on ostraca, while incense perfumed the low ceiling. The value created was political stability entwined with cosmic harmony, and the chamber's secrecy ensured the rite carried weight free from public dispute. Another breath pause unfurls. The desert croons softly. Time feels viscous. In 2018, drone photogrammetry mapped micro-buckle patterns on the Sphinx's surface. The drones hummed like lazy hornets, their rotors stirring warm air scented with limestone dust. Data points revealed subtle subsidence near the left paw, correlating with the suspected chamber's outline at depth. Structural engineers reviewing 3D models glowing on laptop screens noted the need for gentle reinforcement before any entry attempt. Instead of rushing, they proposed fiber optic probes, yet budgetary caution delayed implementation. The silence here arose from prudence. The risk of destabilizing the ancient guardian outweighed the allure of immediate revelation. The drones landed softly on padded mats, their casing warm to the touch, as the sun dipped behind the plateau, turning the Sphinx's profile into a serene silhouette against crimson sky. Step into 90 BCE, when Hermetic philosophers active in Memphis debated cosmic ascent. A recently translated Greek papyrus, smelling of aged wine residue, describes initiates descending the lion's throat to undergo sensory deprivation, emerging with star-bound visions. The chamber functioned as a ritual incubator. They sat on cool stone benches, tasted bitter herbs, and listened to dripping water echo in darkness. Their experience generated personal transformation, a power that fed philosophical texts influencing later mystical traditions. The papyrus warns that describing the chamber's layout to outsiders erodes its potency, so silence became a doctrinal command. The hush was reverence, not fear, preserving the intangible energy built in stone and shadow. The hush drifts on. Nearby, a jackal barks once. Lamps flutter. When 2002's Japan-Egypt Sphinx restoration project applied ultrasonic testing, the handheld transducers chirped against the stone like tiny songbirds. Results indicated a layered structure under the paw, with smoother surfaces reflecting waves differently than the rough bedrock. Engineer Kenji Morita, cheeks flushed from the sun, felt the device vibrate in his gloved palm. He imagined polished floors waiting below, perhaps inscribed with blue-green faience inlays. Yet diplomatic schedules required months of negotiation before further steps. Cultural reciprocity demanded patience. Silence, again, was collaborative respect. The team logged their readings meticulously, the paper smelling of fresh ink, and covered the paw with canvas to temper temperature swings, like tucking the guardian in for a careful sleep. Return to 1160 CE, when poet Usama ibn Munkid visited Giza. His travelogue, scented faintly of dried roses pressed between pages, mentions a hermit who meditated near the Sphinx, claiming to hear nightly whispers from the earth. The hermit described the soil as cool silk under his robes and the breeze as carrying hints of cardamom from distant kitchens. Usama recorded that the man refused to lead him to the rumored stair, believing that divulging it would break his covenant of awe. Here, silence sprang from personal devotion. The chamber's importance was not only historical but spiritual, a well of solace. Usama respected the choice, instead describing the way moonlight silvered the guardian's face, leaving listeners to imagine the unseen wonders themselves. Listen. The plateau yawns. A falcon's shadow passes without sound. An international consortium in 2021 introduced muon tomography, placing detectors in the Sphinx temple to read cosmic ray trajectories. The detectors, packed in foam cases that smelled faintly of new plastic, clicked softly as particles registered. Within months, data indicated a dense void aligned east-west beneath the left paw, approximately the size of a chapel. Lead scientist, approximately the size of a chapel. Amara Singh sipped strong coffee, its aroma cutting through the midnight chill as she plotted the results. She proposed a fiber optic survey, yet global travel restrictions stalled the plan. Delay was born of circumstance, human health overriding exploration. Amara recorded a meditation in her field journal, acknowledging that the Sphinx had survived pandemics before and could wait. Her gloves, warmed by hand warmers, glided over the sandstone, feeling the guardian's patient roughness. Shift to 400 BCE, when Egyptian astronomer priest Tijar-Nefer inscribed a star manual now housed in Turin. The papyrus, with surfaces soft as leather, instructs novices to descend with clean hands, carrying lamps perfumed with juniper, to the chamber of alignment. It details the ritual, placing bronze gnomons that catch lamplight, verifying solstitial angles essential for festivals honoring Sekhmet. The manual highlights the value. Without precise timing, supplication rites risked misalignment, imperiling royal favor. The chamber's sanctity thus underpinned agricultural and political stability. Reflection arises, knowledge stored in hidden rooms sustained entire social rhythms. The papyrus edges crackle under slight pressure, reminding us that instructions fragile as dried leaves once orchestrated the swelling of the Nile. A gentle pause ripples. Starlight thickens. The hollow hums. Archaeomusicologist Samir El-Fayez, in 2012, reconstructed instruments likely used in the Sphinx's subterranean rites. Reeds soaked in Nile water emitted sweet, reedy notes when played within a replica limestone chamber. The acoustics produced standing waves that caressed listeners' skin, felt as gentle vibrations along forearms. Samir's studio smelled of beeswax and cedar as he shaved reeds with a bronze blade. He theorized that the chamber's shape amplified certain frequencies, reinforcing solemn oaths recited there. The music's power lay in binding officiants to cosmic truths. The sensation of sound physically wrapping around congregants justified the secret architecture. Critics scoffed, yet Samir insisted that sensory experience was data, his argument resonating like the lingering tones drifting through his dimly lit workshop. Turning to 640 BCE, we find Nubian ruler Taharqa commissioning repairs on the Sphinx. Reliefs from Kawa, still carrying the scent of elephants from the riverbank mud used in conservation, show artisans smoothing plaster over the pores. Taharqa sought to align his rule with solar deities. The chamber beneath likely hosted rites recalibrating this connection. Records mention priests moistening linen with lotus-infused water, dabbing it on stones to appease ancestral spirits. Their work created political cohesion, convincing both Egyptian and Nubian elites that cosmic favor was shared. Silence followed because unity required guarded rituals. Broadcasting them risked division. The plaster, even now, retains faint fingerprints that feel like ripples under modern hands, a tactile testament to devotion. Pause again. The wind cools tongues. Sand tastes faintly of chalk. Ethnographer Leila Boutros in 1975 recorded Giza oral histories from elderly camel drivers who spoke of secret breathing wells near the Sphinx. Their tents smelled of coffee and sweat-dimmed leather, and the stories unfolded under lantern light. One elder described leaning against a stone that vibrated softly at dusk, as if air moved inside. Leila taped the conversation on reel-to-reel, the machine's wheels spinning with a low purr. She sensed that these narratives preserved memory of genuine vent shafts. Yet when she proposed minor excavations, authorities declined, wary that foreign treasure hunters might exploit such rumors. Community trust, not evidence, directed the hush. The tapes now rest in a climate-controlled archive, foam padding smelling of acetone, awaiting scholars ready to listen again. Reflective cadence continues. A candle guttered. Echoes linger. In 2023, heritage technologist Omar Reyes employed hyperspectral imaging to examine the Sphinx's surface at sunrise. The device emitted a faint buzzing, and the morning air tinged with jasmine from nearby gardens kissed his cheeks. The data revealed mineral signatures suggestive of ancient pigments tracing a previously unknown inscription near the left paw. The script referenced the Door of Dawn, perhaps pointing to the hidden chamber. Omar considered releasing the findings instantly, but coordinated with Egyptian conservators, recognizing the need for shared stewardship. Instead of suppression, a respectful pause allowed for conservation planning. The Sphinx's stone warmed under the sun, colours ghosting into view briefly before fading, as though the guardian teased knowledge in response to patient reverence. We drift back to circa 500 CE, when Coptic monks repurposed pharaonic sites for Christian contemplation. A fragmentary sermon, written on parchment that smells of frankincense, mentions silent vigils held near the Sphinx, with monks placing their ears to the ground to hear Gabriel's wing beat. They treasured the hush, believing the subterranean chamber echoed with heavenly resonance, yet they warned novices against entering, lest humility evaporate. This decision reflects a motivation of spiritual awe. The chamber's value was not in documents, but in the contemplative space it represented. The sermon's ink stains fingertips purple, reminding readers that devotion sometimes paints itself onto those who handle sacred words. Breath pause whispers. Cool night wraps ankles. The hollow watches. When 2010's cross-disciplinary archive initiative unearthed Italian diplomat letters from 1849, scholars smelled the faint perfume of pressed violets within the folders. The letters detailed a clandestine attempt by antiquities smugglers to breach the Sphinx's base. Rain halted them, mud collapsed the pit, nearly suffocating a worker. Fear ended the operation, proving that accidents can be stern guardians. The diplomat advocated increased patrols, understanding that the monument's integrity protects Egypt's narrative authority. The worker, pulled free with face spattered in clay, described hearing deep, rumbling noises, perhaps shifting fill, perhaps the chamber's sigh. The letters, edges worn, now rest in padded blue boxes, cautioning that not all discoveries are meant to be seized by hurried hands. We continue circling. Lantern soot drifts. Hearts keep silent time. Anthropologist Yuki Tanaka in 2015 analysed residue from Sphinx enclosure altars, finding traces of cedar oil and crushed lapis. Under microscope light, the lapis sparkled like midnight frost, and the lab smelled of solvents. She concluded that offerings included aromatic oils meant to seep into the stone, perhaps perfuming the hidden chamber through capillaries. Such rituals imbued the subterranean space with intangible wealth scent as spiritual currency. Reflection muses, even without entering the chamber, participants altered its atmosphere, suggesting remote activation of sacred power. Yuki's published report, Edges Smoothed by Repeated Handling, invited further research into sensory offerings that bridged surface and depth. The nocturne persists. Sand cools further. Silence nestles. Examining 1927 newspapers stored in brittle stacks smelling of newsprint and dust, we find mention of a rumoured British attempt to siphon treasure from under the Sphinx. Investigative journalist Amina Farouk traced the story, interviewing guards who heard pickaxes clanging at midnight. She discovered the culprits were smugglers disguised as surveyors, halted before reaching the chamber. Amina's article highlighted the need for vigilant stewardship, framing the Sphinx as a national trust. Her words described the moonlight glinting on contraband tools, the metal chill biting fingers. The scandal's exposure suppressed further tampering, proving that transparency can serve as a protective silence. By airing the attempt, she discouraged repetition. The newsroom reeked of ink and adrenaline as her story went to press, reinforcing the Guardian's sanctity. Breathing slows. The plateau glows pale. Another ripple fades. In 1931, Czech Egyptologist Ludmila Navratilova catalogued amulets found near the Sphinx's claws. They smelled of aged copper and earth, each wrapped in linen still faintly scented with marjoram. One amulet depicted Shu, god of air, hinting that control of breath, literal and cosmic, was central to the chamber's role, perhaps a sanctuary where airflow symbolized celestial balance. Ludmila's catalogue noted the linen's weave, the weight of each charm, the patina's cool feel against her skin. She speculated the amulets were offerings asking the Sphinx to maintain the hidden hall's purity. The museum stored them in velvet-lined drawers, the fibres soft as night clouds, preserving their whisper. A gentle pause returns. Torches dim. The desert's heart beats slow. In 2000, satellite-penetrating radar sponsored by ESA skimmed over Giza, its radio waves bathing the plateau with silent pulses. Analysts detected anomalies consistent with man-made chambers at 20 meters depth, their shapes rectangular with rounded corners. The data, visualized in false color maps smelling faintly of toner when printed, offered fresh impetus to investigate the Sphinx's underbelly. Yet international politics demanded coordination. Egypt asserted rightful leadership. Partners concurred. The consensus, plan methodically, avoid colonial echoes. Silence held while committees drafted protocols. Meanwhile, the Sphinx basked in morning sun, its stone warm, absorbing the radar's invisible caress without complaint. Another breath. Pause alights. Dew settles. The Guardian hears. In 2024, eco-hydrologist Rana Al-Haddad studied groundwater flow beneath Giza, piping clear water samples into vials that tasted lightly of iron when tested. Her models suggested that the Sphinx's chamber might have doubled as an ancient aquifer regulator, preventing seepage that could destabilize nearby temples. The idea reframed the secret as a hydraulic miracle protecting infrastructure through concealed engineering. Rana presented her findings in a tent smelling of damp canvas after unseasonal rain, noting the hum of portable generators. She emphasized that understanding such ancient sustainability could inform modern conservation. Reflection wonders whether reopening the chamber might reveal forgotten water management wisdom, still relevant in an age of climate strain. Lastly, twilight curls into night as we turn to the present moment. The Sphinx rests beneath gauzy starlight, pores cool, breeze carrying whispers of exhaust from distant Cairo alongside desert sage. Instruments sleep in padded crates, their metal cold, awaiting the day consensus grants them entry below the pore. Measurements from centuries pressed together, a palimpsest of decimals, chants and breaths. We stand outside the hollow, fingertips brushing grit that clings like memory. The unanswered secret under the Sphinx remains a gentle invitation, a reservoir of potential that tingles like a distant drumbeat beneath the sand. Wonder does not demand closure, it asks us to listen, to feel the stone's patient hush, and to let history breathe without forcing its pace. Night continues to drape itself over the plateau, velvet dark and tender, while the Sphinx exhales grit that tastes faintly of pepper and limestone. Far beneath the pores, patience gathers like cool subterranean mist. Imagine that one day, the sealed passage opens and the corridor's breath meets ours. Would the dry script and lullaby, thick air alter how we read humanity's timeline? The question stays soft and persistent, like the pulse felt when resting a forearm on sun-warmed stone. Every new clue seems to hum that the chamber, if revealed, might braid disparate eras together, weaving pharaohs, philosophers, pilgrims, and scientists into a single continuum of hushed devotion. Centuries earlier than Khafre, in roughly 3200 BCE, Naqada artisans shaped pallets for grinding malachite, their hands slick with mineral paste smelling of rain-soaked clay. A recently excavated basalt slab from that era bears carved lions facing a rising sun. Microscopic traces of cinnabar linger in the grooves. Some iconographers argue that these pallets foreshadow the Sphinx concept, guardians fusing animal strength with solar adoration. If so, the chamber beneath the Sphinx may owe its blueprint to a pre-dynastic vision of the horizon as a living beast. Touching the pallet, the stone chills the fingertips, yet the carved lines warm the imagination, whispering that hidden repositories of star lore were imagined long before the Colossus took form. Another strand of evidence emerges from a 5th dynasty papyrus excavated near Saqqara, its fibers still smelling of papyrus marshes drying in sunlight. The text mentions a horizon lodge, where scribes consulted a celestial vault to synchronize the king's soul with the heliacal rise of Sothis. Scholars now believe the horizon lodge might denote the Sphinx's concealed chamber, which could contain star maps etched on electrum plates. The papyrus describes water being sprinkled on the thresholds, the droplets catching torchlight and throwing rainbows across smooth walls. Imagine stepping inside, the air cool, touched with lotus incense, the floor polished until footfalls slide silently. If those plates surface, the sequence of equinoxes noted on them could confirm or revise our understanding of early science, reshaping narratives far beyond Egypt. During the First Intermediate period, around 2100 BCE, when authority fractured and dynasties wavered, the Sphinx's guardianship did not cease. A limestone ostracon found near the Valley Temple records that caretakers coated the entrance stones with ochre and goose fat, their palms red and glossy. They believed the sheen deterred grave robbers and appeased the ancient watchers below. The ostracons scrawled hieratic script, smelling faintly of the beeswax sealant used to preserve it, mentions chanting to awaken the balance. Because these rites continued even amidst political fragmentation, historians suspect the chamber held instructions vital for re-establishing cosmic order. Should those instructions survive, they might present alternate solutions to social collapse, offering lessons modern eyes never expected from an ancient mouth of stone. By the Middle Kingdom's 12th dynasty, evidence suggests that subterranean ceremonies grew more elaborate. An alabaster bas-relief from the reign of Senusret III depicts 7 priestesses carrying baskets lined with cedar shavings and blue lotus petals, their bare feet pressing patterns into wet sand. Inscriptions on the relief speak of restoring the lion's breath every 4th new moon. Each basket contained honey cakes flavored with coriander. Residue analysis still bears that sweet, grassy scent. Scholars propose the cakes were placed on a hidden altar, the sugar-feeding torches that flared like miniature suns. How many nights did they descend, palms sticky, lips murmuring hymns? If their manuals still lie within the chamber, our grasp of Middle Kingdom theology and its sophisticated understanding of astronomy and ritual nutrition could shift like desert dunes under moonlight. Leap forward to around 1350 BCE, when the Amarna revolution unsettled tradition. Letters from Thebes, penned on clay tablets that crumble like shortbread between careful fingers, lament the removal of Amun's statues yet celebrate the Sphinx as an unchanging sentinel. One tablet references secret meetings under the Sphinx, where guardians of the horizon safeguarded star annals resisting the new Atenist doctrine. The clay smells of river mud and wood smoke, and the wedge-shaped script complains that the new sun disk cult overlooked the lion's chamber, to the delight of those who held fast to older cosmic songs. If those annals emerge, they may reveal how priestly factions navigated ideological shifts, providing missing context for one of history's most debated religious experiments. When the Sea Peoples raided around 1175 BCE, coastal shrines suffered. Yet an obscure hymn in the Harris Papyrus describes locking the lion's throat with bronze, perhaps a metaphor for sealing the chamber with metal brackets. The papyrus fibers, surprisingly soft, release a faint odor reminiscent of aged linen. Restoration engineers in the 1980s found corroded bronze straps embedded in mortar near the Sphinx's left paw. Metallurgists concluded they were cast during the Late Bronze Age. These straps imply that guardianship turned increasingly technical, blending ritual with engineering. If the chamber contains Bronze Age contraptions designed to secure archives against invasion, they could redefine our understanding of Egyptian metallurgy and emergency preservation, hinting at resilient strategies that ripple into modern heritage management. During the Saite revival of the 26th dynasty, artisans embellished the Sphinx colonnades with pale blue encaustic paint, fragments of which still smell faintly of beeswax when warmed. Recently, a fragmentary stele unearthed near the Nile's bank recounts an oracle pronouncing that the lion's book will outlast foreign kings. The stele's hieroglyphs, sharp and confident, describe a ritual in which scribes carried papyrus scrolls wrapped in linen, stiffened with natron. Each scroll was sealed with lapis beads whose surfaces are cold and glassy to the touch. The ritual, according to the stele, guaranteed that whatever was stored under the Sphinx would resurface when the world seeks its forgotten mornings. The statement reads like a promise, suggesting the chamber's contents were meant to resurface when humanity was ready to recalibrate its history. Shift to 3031 BCE, the year after Alexander's arrival, when Macedonian surveyors mapped Giza's topography with cords dusted in gypsum. A small bronze tablet found in Alexandria's Serapean references, lion vault coordinates, aligning with specific stars of the zodiac newly popular in Hellenistic courts. The bronze's patina smells of damp earth and oil, and the engraved lines catch light like glinting fish scales. The text hints that Greek scholars sought to fuse Egyptian stellar wisdom with their own astrology, perhaps to predict political tides. Should the chamber hold a bilingual star calendar, it might show the exact moment Greek and Egyptian cosmologies intertwined, altering how we perceive cultural exchange at the dawn of the Hellenistic age. When the Ptolemaic queen Arsinoe II sponsored temple refurbishments around 250 BCE, papyri from her court mention perfumers blending iris root, cinnamon bark, and honey to create lion's breath ointment. Conservation chemists recently replicated the mixture. It smells like sugared spice with a smoky undertone. According to the papyri, the ointment was brushed onto copper rods used to open the chamber, ensuring the air within remained fragrant and purified. If those rods exist within the sealed hall, residues could reveal trade links stretching to the Aegean and Indus, rewriting assumptions about supply chains. Each aromatic note becomes a data point. Each preserved scent a whisper of networks that once spanned continents. Under Roman rule, an inscription now stored in the Museo Gregoriano Egizio describes the Emperor Claudius commissioning surveyors to verify the lion's measures during a Nile flood. The inscription is carved on travertine, its surface porous and cool, smelling faintly of chalk when misted. It reports that Roman hydrologists inserted reed gauges into shafts near the Sphinx, listening for echoes to judge depth. The notion that imperial engineers relied on subterranean cavities for hydrological forecasting suggests the chamber doubled as a flood warning system. Discovering physical gauges, perhaps bronze studded with measurement marks, would reveal a sophisticated integration of sacred architecture and civic planning, forcing historians to reconsider Rome's dependence on Egyptian expertise. During the 3rd century CE, as Christianity spread, desert hermits known as anchorites sought solitude near Giza. A recently translated Coptic parchment, fragile as moth wings, recounts a vision where the Sphinx's hidden hall shimmered with letters of living light. The parchment smells of wind-dried leather and candle soot. It encourages practitioners to contemplate the lion's silence rather than pry open its door, suggesting that spiritual insight could be gained by imagining the chamber instead of entering it. This contemplative approach means that the chamber served as a mental construct as well as a physical space, shaping doctrinal meditation. If early Christian theology absorbed Egyptian sacred geography, the chamber becomes a bridge between worlds, reframing how we trace the roots of mysticism. Under the Umayyad Caliphate in 705 CE, an administrative papyrus found in Fustat records tax exemptions granted to the keepers of the lion, a hereditary guild charged with maintaining the enclosure. The papyrus smells of old parchment and cumin from a spilled spice jar that stained one corner centuries ago. It mentions that the keepers stored polished obsidian mirrors in a subterranean recess to catch moonlight and signal to night patrols. If those mirrors persist, their obsidian surfaces might reflect a more inclusive story, one where caliphate governance recognized the Sphinx's strategic and spiritual significance. Analysis of their origin could reveal trade lines stretching into sub-Saharan Africa or Anatolia, expanding our map of cultural exchange. When Fatimid artisans retiled mosques in the 11th century, they also repaired cracks around the Sphinx. An inscription on a limestone block now housed in the Museum of Islamic Art praises the guardian as the steadfast shield of the desert's memory. The block's surface, smoothed by centuries of wind, feels like cool soapstone. The calligraphy curls like tendrils of incense smoke, and a faint scent of jasmine oil lingers from a conservation treatment. The inscription implies that Islamic scholars appreciated the Sphinx as a keeper of collective heritage, not just pagan relic. If the chamber below holds artifacts from this era, perhaps Quranic verses inscribed on papyrus or astrolabes calibrated to Mecca, they might demonstrate a reverent adaptation of ancient sites to new faiths, reinforcing the idea that knowledge under the pores could unite rather than divide. During the waning Crusader years, around 1250 CE, a Syrian chronicle references an Armenian mason tasked with reinforcing the lion's belly against erosion. According to the chronicle, the mason hammered lead wedges into gaps while chanting in a language like tinkling bells. The parchment crackles when handled, and its ink smells faintly of ferric tannin. The text mentions he glimpsed a hidden staircase sealed by blocks that felt warm despite the cold night. If true, those lead wedges might still hold a stairway intact. Metallurgical analysis could date them, offering proof that medieval craftsmen intentionally protected the chamber. Such evidence would reveal shared stewardship across cultures, undermining assumptions of outright neglect during transitional eras. The Mamluk period adds another layer. A 14th century glass weight discovered in Cairo bears an inscription dedicating revenue from caravan tolls to the Lion's Wall upkeep. The glass shines with iridescent swirls that smell lightly of kelp when moistened. Economic historians infer that protecting the Sphinx had fiscal importance. Its enclosure perhaps served as a landmark ensuring safe commerce along desert routes. If financial tablets or coin caches are found under the pore, they might illuminate trade networks linking Giza to Damascus or Constantinople, tangibly connecting the guardian's sanctity to economic stability. Ottoman archives from 1571 contain a decree ordering engineers to inspect monuments after heavy flooding. The decree, inked on paper that rustles like dry leaves and releases a faint scent of musk, specifically mentions the Sphinx, instructing inspectors to ensure the lion's undercroft remains sealed against water. Ottoman engineers recorded the placement of cedar drains stuffed with cotton to absorb moisture. Should those drains survive, their textile fibers might retain pollen and dust, providing data on historical climate conditions. That information could recalibrate climate models, demonstrating how knowledge sheltered under stone might aid modern environmental studies, thus rewriting more than cultural history. It could reshape ecological narratives. Napoleonic savants, beyond their original surveys, left behind one overlooked artifact, an iron alidade used by engineer Edmé-François Jomard. Found recently in a Parisian attic, the instrument smells of rust and old tobacco. Scratched into its base are coordinates referencing a second cavity under the Sphinx. Though dismissed for decades as an error, contemporary topographers reassessed the data and found the angles align with anomalies detected in modern scans. The alidade, once clutched by hands stained with gunpowder and sand, thus bridges past and present measurements. If the chamber yields a map matching his coordinates, it would vindicate early triangulations and demonstrate that even in war, precision may outlast chaos. Early in the 19th century, local Giza families forged their own protective practices. Oral histories recorded by folklorist Mahmud Hassan in 1872 described moonlit rituals where women scattered crushed chamomile around the Sphinx to keep the lion dreaming peacefully. The transcripts smell of dried herbs stored alongside petals in embroidered pouches. These communities insisted that anyone approaching the pores with tools must first listen for the Sphinx's breath by pressing an ear to the stone. The custom extended into the colonial period, imparting a grassroots stewardship. Imagine if the chamber walls still contain offering bowls etched with names from these families. Their presence would anchor the narrative in living memory, rewriting heritage as a partnership between locals and the monument, rather than a story of foreign discovery alone. American philanthropists funded limited excavations in 1909. Among the field notes preserved at Yale lies a pressed desert poppy petal, its colour faded to gentle peach, scent faintly floral when warmed by breath. The accompanying note describes workers hearing a hollow resonance when tapping the flagstone between the pores, like drumming on a tomb's lid. They suspended work after a sand squall blinded half the crew. The note's author speculated that destiny itself was guarding the entrance. If their plaster casts or core samples remain labelled and stored, re-examination using today's dating techniques could fill chronological gaps, connecting the tactile sensation of a hollow thud with precise measurements that may have been lost to storm and time. The interwar period brought fresh curiosity. In 1933, Egyptian architect Hassan Fathi sketched ventilation models for the Sphinx, hypothesizing that the underlying chamber was designed to regulate temperature, preventing cracking in the superstructure. His sketchbook, preserved in an archive scented with cedar cabinets, contains delicate pencil lines showing cross-sections of the pores and arrows indicating airflow. He annotated the design with notes about cool night currents smelling of desert sage. If sensors inside the chamber confirm such airflow engineering, it would elevate ancient Egyptian architectural knowledge to new heights, revising textbooks that presently understate their mastery of passive climate control. World War II layered its own whispers. British troops stationed near Giza built sandbag emplacements against potential air raids. A diary from RAF pilot Anne Cartwright, pages smelling of ink and kerosene, describes a night patrol when ordnance detectors registered hollow pockets under the Sphinx. She wrote of pressing her palm to the pore, feeling faint warmth seeping from the stone despite the chill. Military necessity interrupted further exploration, yet her precise coordinates match muon readings collected decades later. If wartime technicians inadvertently confirmed the chamber's presence, their reports deserve reinterpretation. The narrative of secret caches becomes interwoven with global conflict history, hinting that even in wartime, the Sphinx quietly reminded observers of far older stories. In 1958, after the dams reshaped the Nile's flow, hydrologist Ali Rashwan analysed seepage around Giza. He noted an underground breath that tasted of minerals when he sampled the air emerging from a narrow fissure near the left pore. His notebooks, smudged with graphite, recorded humidity spikes at dawn, leading him to suspect a cavity storing moisture. He proposed injecting harmless coloured smoke to trace the airflow, but funding never materialised. Ali's datasheets, now smelling faintly of the tobacco he used to mark pages, remain a trove. Combined with modern sensors, they could model ancient ventilation precisely. If the chamber once managed humidity to safeguard scrolls, revisiting Rashwan's work may illuminate overlooked environmental engineering, altering our interpretation of Egyptian science. The 1960s brought the roaring humidity of the Aswan High Dam project. Engineers worried about rising groundwater impacting monuments. A faintly musty report from 1964 documents boreholes drilled near the Sphinx. At 18 meters, they struck an air pocket, exhaling air scented with dust and ancient spices. Sensors registered a temperature drop of 5 degrees Celsius. The engineers sealed the borehole swiftly to prevent intrusion, but their logbook sketched an approximate outline of the cavity. This sketch, rediscovered in 2019, aligns with present-day muon scans. When combined, these records suggest the subterranean hall has remained stable despite hydrological shifts. If we ever confirm it stored scrolls, their survival might owe much to these silent breaths of cool air, a subtlety that could rewrite conservation practices by highlighting ancient climate control success. During the 1977 Giza Plateau Mapping Project, archaeologist Mark Lehner's early drawings included note of a limestone plug with resonance. His field diary, smelling of dust and cedar pencil shavings, mentions how tapping the plug produced a tone like a low bell. He speculated it capped a void and considered removal, but scarcity of manpower halted the idea. The diary also records Bedouin advice to leave the tone undisturbed. They believed the sound was the lion's heart. Lehner's caution preserved the plug, which means the chamber likely remains sealed. If modern teams re-examine that exact stone, guided by the same resonance, they will bridge decades of scholarship, perhaps confirming that reverent restraint sometimes protects data better than rash intrusion. As global interest resurged in the 1990s, satellite communications beamed live images of the Sphinx worldwide. Amid the fanfare, a lesser-known 1994 analytical report recorded traces of aromatic compounds, myrrh, frankincense, and cedarwood, emanating from microfissures near the pores during warm afternoons. The instrument used, a portable mass spectrometer, emitted soft whirs and beeped gently. The data suggested residues of ancient rituals baked into the limestone. If the chamber contains sealed amphorae of ritual oils, their chemical composition could recalibrate our understanding of trade, agriculture, and sacred practice. The idea that fragrance molecules still drift outward after thousands of years is enough to make a listener close their eyes and inhale, letting the desert's perfume suggest stories yet untold. The new millennium layered technology upon tradition. In 2008, a consortium introduced fiber optic sensors along cracks to monitor micro-movements. The slender cables, warm to the touch, clicked softly as technicians secured them under twilight sky. A report freed decades later revealed that one sensor detected rhythmic vibrations near midnight during the equinox, oscillations reminiscent of footfalls or perhaps expansions caused by temperature swings. The pattern's periodicity led astronomers to suspect the chamber's architecture responds to celestial alignments, possibly opening vents when certain stars rise. If this mechanism is confirmed, it would demonstrate that the chamber is a vast, precise instrument tuned to the cosmos. Such an architectural achievement could reshape engineering histories, showing that ancient Egyptians built dynamic structures that interacted with the sky much like observatories. As climate change concerns sharpened in 2015, conservationists installed soil moisture probes around the Sphinx. During a rare foggy morning, the probes recorded an unusual drop in ambient moisture near the left pore, as though the ground exhaled dry air. The technicians noted a faint scent of cardamom carried with the breeze. Their report, stored in a binder smelling of vinyl and dust, suggests internal cavities maintain their own microclimates, perhaps optimizing conditions for papyri or instruments. Understanding this microclimate could guide modern archivists in designing stable repositories. If the chamber preserves such a self-regulating environment, it reveals a level of environmental mastery that history has yet to ascribe to ancient architects, urging us to revise narratives about technological progression. During the 2019 solar eclipse visible in parts of Africa, a small team of astronomers gathered near the Sphinx to monitor gravitational effects on the plateau. One scientist, Marwa Abdelrahman, recorded low-frequency vibrations using geophones. She described in her field journal the gentle thump-thump felt through the desert floor, nearly matching the eclipse's phases. The journal's pages, lined with grid paper smelling of graphite and desert dust, highlight that the vibrations originated near the hidden cavity. Perhaps the chamber amplifies celestial events, acting like an ancient seismograph tuned to the heavens. If so, artifacts inside might chronicle eclipses, comets, or planetary conjunctions. Such records could sync Egyptian chronology with global astronomical phenomena, recalibrating dates and revealing that a stone lion once listened to the cosmos with the precision of an observatory. Meanwhile, Global Digital Archives in 2022 revealed 19th century missionary letters previously unknown to Egyptologists. A letter from Reverend Elias Thatcher, paper smelling faintly of mildew, recounts a dream in which monks described golden discs humming beneath the lion. He believed the discs to be symbols, but modern scholars theorize they could be systems or astrolabes. If the chamber conceals polished metal discs still intact, their inscriptions might double-check astronomical dating for multiple civilizations. The letter also notes that the monks forbade him from measuring the pores, claiming the lion dislikes cold iron. Their reverence may have prevented overzealous tampering, and now, 2 centuries later, their caution might pay off in the form of perfectly preserved instruments waiting in the dark. Simultaneously, African diaspora artists in 2023 began recording soundscapes at Giza, capturing night breezes, camel bells, and whispers of visitors. One recording by sound artist Ayana Jacob, stored digitally yet accompanied by a cedar-scented notebook, captured a subaudible hum near the Sphinx pores when the Milky Way arched overhead. Audio analysts found frequencies resonating with notes in ancient Egyptian hymns. If the chamber engineered such resonance intentionally, it suggests a sensory design aimed at invoking calm or sacred awe. Musicologists could then trace influences from Egyptian tonal structures into later African musical traditions, rewriting the lineage of sound by linking it to subterranean chambers that sang silently through stone. In 2024, as remote collaboration flourished, machine learning experts trained neural networks on the compendium of historical measurements, forming predictive models of the Sphinx's interior. The algorithms, running on servers that whirred like subdued cicadas, predicted a multi-level hall with limestone benches, copper inlays, and a central plinth etched with star diagrams. The model's visualizations, displayed on monitors in dim rooms smelling of brewed mint tea, look almost dreamlike. If future explorations confirm the model, it would show how digital intuition can resurrect architectural layouts long buried, bridging human curiosity and computational inference. The prospect of comparing predicted patterns with actual carvings could refine both archaeology and AI, proving that ancient stone and modern code can harmonize in rewriting history. While scholars pore over data, the local community still gathers near the Sphinx at dusk. Children trace their fingers along sketches etched in dust by grandparents whose stories smell of cardamom and charcoal fires. They speak of a day when the lion may choose to wake fully and share its inner song. Elders remind them that maintaining the plateau's quiet respect is also part of the ritual. Without that hush, the door may stay closed. Community guardianship feeds into conservation plans, creating a living covenant. If the chamber opens in their lifetimes, it should do so with their blessing, ensuring that the rewriting of history includes voices long marginalized by academia. Their songs, whispered like lullabies under the stars, are as vital as any inscription. As the 21st century unfolds, archaeologists assemble non-invasive probes, slender as reed pens. The prototypes, stored in cases smelling of sterilized plastic, await permits that balance curiosity with protection. The day those probes slip between stones, they may capture images of cartouches unknown to us, or they may simply reveal smooth walls etched with faint golden paint. Either outcome matters. Even a pristine, empty chamber would rewrite history by confirming that the ancients built vast spaces solely for rituals, not treasures. Yet hope lingers that scrolls, statues, or mechanical devices rest inside, ready to complicate timelines and challenge assumptions about technological leaps. The world's timeline might suddenly tilt, aligning Egypt's shadowed manuscripts with previously distant cultures. Imagine stepping into that chamber with senses humming softly, breath steaming in cool air. The stones smell thick like rain on dust. The floor might feel surprisingly smooth, almost oily, from centuries of priests walking with sandaled feet dusted in aromatic oils. The walls could carry faint pigments glowing in lamplight, deep indigo constellations against milk-white limestone. Perhaps a central plinth holds a diorite box, its lid sealed with beeswax now hardened like amber. Inside may lie copper discs etched with eclipses, or papyrus scrolls describing migrations predating known chronicles, or instructions for aligning temples with pulsars we only recently catalogued. Every artifact would be a syllable in a new story, one that knits global histories tighter, insisting that the Sphinx's subterranean whispers echo far beyond the plateau. If such evidence surfaces, textbooks might shift pages, museum displays might rewire lighting to highlight cross-cultural threads, and early civilizations previously deemed isolated might suddenly appear as nodes within a vibrant, ancient network. The secrets under the Sphinx could reveal collaborative experiments between Egyptian astronomers and Nubian philosophers, between Greek engineers and local artisans, between Roman hydrologists and temple guardians. They might prove that complex data sharing existed long before modern archives, encoded in rituals, scents, and starlit ceremonies. The confirmation would ripple across classrooms, turning hushed bedtime stories into catalysts for academic revision, yet retaining the soft cadence of wonder. Even if the chamber remains sealed, the pursuit has already transformed the narrative. Each measurement, each poem, each field note smelling of dust and dried flowers adds new layers to the tale. The Sphinx becomes less an inert monument and more an active participant in our collective quest to understand ourselves. The gentle tone of these histories invites us to approach with humility, to imagine that knowledge can be both delicate and profound, best absorbed when whispered under starlight. If the secrets under the Sphinx one day step into the dawn, they will not merely rewrite history. They will remind us that history is always breathing, always expanding, always waiting for ears willing to listen with